Yes, we did it. Okay, so the other thing that I did this week, because it was really hard for me not to go into the deer after we left last class, like really hard. And I didn't even do an analysis. Like I didn't even throw tracing paper over to try and figure out what was going on. And I've had a week to think about it and to like manage my manage my fear a little bit, because it is definitely a little bit scary. Okay, hopefully this works. Can you guys see this smiley face up here? Yeah. Now the question is that going to be able to come over top of, will it be visible over top of the black lines that are already there? And they're kind of confusing. Yeah, they are a little bit. So I used the dry erase marker last time because it was so thick. Is that what happened? I think that's what happened, but it wasn't specific. This time I might use tracing paper so that you can really see the difference. Let's see what happens when I put the tracing paper over that. So Stephanie and Maureen, before you guys got on, I was let me show that, because I don't think I emailed it to you all.
Oh, I saw the sketching you did. The sketch you did.
Yeah, I got
on the chalkboard.
Oh, I did do it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was
beautiful.
cool. That was very cool.
It was fun. It was fun. I was saying, I've been getting a lot of distance out of these deer. Okay, so this was the analysis that I did in my private lesson, and that has tracing paper over it. So I think I'm hoping that the tracing paper at the school isn't different than the tracing paper that we have here. You can see how when you use the different color, how nicely that shows up.
Yep.
I think I'm going to go more that route. I love the transparency, but with something that's as delicate as this, having a fine line really makes a difference. I mean, the dry erase marker is great, but decoding it with this level of precision, I think, is a little bit.
This is great. This is easy to see.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to see. Okay, now this is the moment of truth here. Is it even visible? It's not. See, if I press it down, it's not. It's better.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and keep it pressed. And I really don't have room to zoom in much further because I want to keep our first deer on the screen. All right. This is good. This is good. This is scary and wonderful. You can do purple. Let's try purple. Okay, so this is actually kind of interesting. So with the last week, let me just practice and make sure this works. When I built that trapezoid and these cubes, knee to ankle, then ankle to the ball of the foot, and then the ball of the foot to the fused finger, and then the hoof. There was an interesting moment that I talked about, and which I didn't mention to you all, and that has to do with the joint. Like these two sets of bones coming together made sort of this like enclosure, almost like it was a separate form. So before I made, the thigh, which was from hip to knee, that cube, and you could see the inside of the cube was in shadow. Then it went from knee down to the ankle. And, you know, you could make it 3D. You could also just put the deep crevice that is like the Achilles tendon. And then we built the top of that box, and then it runs down. And because of the delicacy of the drawing, the third dimension was a little bit harder to express. Now you could find it, you could look for it, you could like almost force it a little bit. But in my other classes, especially with the kids, you know, where it gets from 3D, it kind of shrinks almost down to 2D. So then there's the fused finger, the fused toes, and then into the hoof. But there was a curve in here, which basically encapsulated the thicker part of the upper bone, and then the thicker part of the lower bone, and it really did make, you know, kind of like a nice identifiable orb or an egg shape. It happens in the wrist as well, up here in our in our standing buck. You know, the buck that's kind of taking is on the lower hand
Oh
one
my
at the moment.
God.
So there were two different ways that I was conceiving of this, of kind of moving into the white buck. And it's like identifying where are the contact points between the white stag and the dark stag, and, you know, getting oriented that way. So if you, for example, you know, if you made your deer taller than in the original, you know, you would be able to, by showing that the back of the pelvis right here, you know, is relating to the back of the pelvis on this side, you have this kind of contact point. You know, you have this like elbow shape of the ankle, and then there's the elbow of the ankle relating to, you know, in between the ankle. So it's like there's two ankles on the standing stag, and then, you know, the ankle of the white stag is between that, which is interesting. So it's we're not making the second deer is not in isolation. The first deer was easy in the sense that we had to make all the proportions relative to itself, and we didn't have to worry about anything else in the environment. I mean, maybe you could consider like the ground plane, but the ground plane is going to be the ground plane no matter what. So we have to make the second deer basically in relationship to the first deer. And if we start with the contact points, we start analyzing the contact points, and actually not only start analyzing, but start drawing, you know, relative to our first deer, the chances of our proportions being similar go up like a lot. Like if we were just to start randomly with the head over here, which is where I would probably start drawing the deer if I was drawing this guy independent, I'd start with the head, going to the neck, into the body, you know, and then wherever the feet might like, you know, like land, fine. Here it's not fine. You kind of have to, you know, you want these two to be in concert, because mainly because of the rhythms and the connection and the drama of the situation. So the important points of contact are the back of the pelvis here, and then the ankle in the middle, and then finally the standing point of this hoof, which is interesting because it's just a little, you know, it's a very faint suggestion of a foot. And I think I figured out a lot of, you know, there's an interesting conceptual relationship. We have a lot of 3D components in the back of the deer. And then as we move kind of closer to the front two legs, and then even like the ears and the antlers, and even the head to a degree, it's relatively flat. Like it's largely two-dimensional shapes. These standing legs of the white stag, those legs are almost in profile. So we're seeing, like, you know, it's a side view. The legs are split, but it's still a side view. Oh my gosh, that's too funny. Maybe I should do it. No, I won't do it. No, I will show it. Look at this. So I was teaching these guys, we had a sports day at we had a sports day at Gilman. We were sketching just like different sporting events. And some were significant historical sporting components, and then most of them were just like really great photographs. But there's this great shot of Usain Bolt, and he's like so far ahead, and he does it with a smile on his face, and he does it like it's so easy. Like the ease is like incredible. So it's almost the same pose if you look at it. The hips, the different part of the stride. So his left leg is forward, his right leg is back. This guy's left leg is back, his right leg is forward, but it doesn't matter. His pelvis and his legs are completely in profile. And then, his torso is turning towards us slightly because this arm is kicked back. But his head is in 3/4. So this is in profile. His chest is turned towards us a little bit, and then his face is turned towards us like full 3/4. So if you were to like imagine a slightly different pose and he kept going, the torso would turn towards us and the head would turn, and it would basically be like this same thing. So by getting 3/4 views, not profile views offer really strong 2-dimensional shapes. 3/4 views offer strong 3-dimensional shapes. So what we've got is like the legs that are relatively 2D, meaning they're like flat shapes and they're in the background. And then as this torso, as his hips turn, the chest turns towards us. So we get a whole front plane of the front of the chest. And then the head turns so aggressively that we're seeing the front of the face on this side and the side of the face. So let me see if I can, I don't want to ruin my analysis, but we're getting the front of the torso here and then the side of the torso here. Then because the neck is so massive and so agile and so strong that it's able to turn so aggressively, then we're seeing the front of the face here and then the side of the face as well. So the torso looks this way, the face looks that way, and the legs are in 2 dimensions essentially. So by going, and it took me a little while to wrap my head around that, because when I went into these legs, I was looking for all of this geometry, the spectacular decodes that we did in the standing legs, this 2D, are sort of lost in the white stag. And what's nice is that when you're an artist and you're studying an animal, usually you don't get to see for very long a lot of the same animal, multiple animals together for a composition. So what happens is you wind up learning how to draw one animal. Like there's one deer in a pen, and you draw them a bunch of times. And then because you know the nature of that beast or that figure or whatever the thing is, then you can draw it from your imagination from a bunch of different angles. So what's kind of cool is that what I suspect is that this is the same deer that he's drawn many times. So he's got that in his head. And so basically we're drawing 2 of the exact same deer. So these legs are these legs, but from just a slightly different angle, like on a practical sense. Like when you're an artist and you're sitting there and got a deer in their, in a pen in their backyard, and they're like, okay, yeah, I want to draw this thing. Or if you hunt a deer and you have the deer and you get to have that specimen, and then you can activate it. So that's the other thing. So these legs are going to be very similar, but they're employed differently. This one with an excess, not an excess, but like full throttle 3 dimensions, where this one is more 2D. It's quieter, it's more recessed. And then this white deer, we're going full throttle 3 dimensions with the chest, with the neck, with the face, and then with these front legs. I mean, look at the overlapping. I mean, we're going to get this foreshortening. I mean, the shoulders into the elbow, are behind the face, and then the elbow is in front of the deltoids, and then the wrist is in front of the forearm. So there's all this foreshortening that's happening, which also foreshortening helps you with the 3rd dimension. Okay, so as we do these legs, I think I'm going to keep them super 2D. I'm almost going to like analyze it erroring on overly two-dimensional components, so that so as we sketch this, we can kind of allow for that intention, which was set by the artist, to kind of, you know, to show through. And then he hides it a little bit, you know what I mean? Like he'll make it look a little bit more three-dimensional, because you see how there's like a little bit of the front of this thigh, you know, it gives a little bit of thickness there, but just with the tone. Cool. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right, so we've got these axis points, and I'm going to use a semicircle, which is just a semicircle, or like a 1/4 of a piece of pie. You know, so this is the round part of a piece of pie, and then this is the, you know, we'll make it 25%. And then I'm going to come down from this is basically the pelvis and the hips. I'm going to come down and go hip to knee, and that's going to be, you know, our rectangle. So in a way, it was almost so simple that it was difficult to decode. So this is hip in that shape, thighs in this rectangle shape, and then knee down to ankle. I don't even know what that kind of is. It's kind of like that curvy moment, and then ankle down to the foot, and then that foot is just, again, a partial trapezoid. One of the most beautiful moments, I think, in animals, and if you have a dog or a cat and they roll on their back and you rub their belly, this little webbing, this loose skin webbing that, you know, connects the rib cage to the thigh. These animals can run so fast, and they need, you know, if you've ever seen a greyhound fully stretched out, where the legs are forward and the feet are forward, and the paws are, you know, the feet are back and the paws are forward, like fully stretched. This is like this elastic region. We have it, you know, in our thumb here, where there's a lot of motion or mobility. So we're going to get this concavity leading, you know, from the pelvis into the rib cage. And there's this little narrow passage, you know, this little like midriff area. You know, it's a relatively lean animal. And then we'll get the actual rib cage, the oval for the rib cage, with semicircle, and we can pull that all the way up, and we're going to see that it gives us the edge of that rib cage, which is almost like in the shoulder girdle. I don't want to do too much, but this is the oval of the rib cage. Now, the really important component to the deer is going to be the center of the sternum. So in the same way that we found the middle of the pelvis back here and followed that spine all the way up, and then hit the shoulders, and then went all the way up the neck into the head, the middle of the chest is going to be really important. So we're going to get the clavicles, this Y shape for the clavicles, which is going to basically separate the rib cage from the neck. All right, not bad. So we went from the pelvis down into the first standing leg, then we went from the pelvis up into the rib cage, and then found the center of that rib cage through the sternum, and it's going to be really something. So we're attaching the front legs to that oval. Okay, so we're going to keep it super simple. We're going to do this thigh. So this is, you know, you don't see the back, you know, you don't see how this thigh attaches to the hips because it's on the other side of the torso, but we're going to get the thighs to the knee. And we're going to go from knee to ankle, making this really elegant trapezoid. And then this hourglass shape, which I just think is so beautiful. 2 concavities. And I think I mentioned it before, you know, these being concave, they're so lean. So they're all tendon and they're all bone. So they tend to just be, you know, bones are concave. The skin wrapping around it might give it a little bit of convexity, but very little. It's concave more where there's muscle. rather than in the tendons. And then we'll do the fused finger or fused toe, I should say, and then the hoof. So it's a whole series of two-dimensional shapes that bring us into the ground plane. This connection between where they're standing is, very important. And it's important, especially in most any standing figure, but in people, that relationship from the middle of the arch of the foot to the middle of the arch of the foot. And it's kind of interesting because if you continue that line, there's this idea that I name all the time, which is called aerial perspective. And aerial perspective says the objects that are lower on, when you're above looking down, the objects lower on the rectangle are closer to you, objects further away. So this foot is closest to us. This would be second closest. Then this front right would be third. Front left would be fourth. And then the front leg, his right leg, is lower than the left leg. And so it just conforms to this idea of aerial perspective, meaning you're up above, looking down, closer, lower, further away, higher. And of course, that principle can be used in clouds. The higher the cloud, the closer. And as the clouds get lower, they get further away from us because they're all reacting to a horizon line. One from above looking down, the other below looking up. Anyway, this is just a side note. All right. So we really had the dimensions on I'm just like reminding myself, we have the scapula and they angle down. There's the scapula bone that links up into the deltoid. So it's the shoulder and the biceps. So you have this whole arm, shoulder, and I did it actually in the kids class. I actually drew like more of a human arm, biceps, deltoid, transition into the forearm. If you think about human anatomy, things become a lot easier. Anyway, so there's miniature human arm here. The reason they're able to run, the reason they're able to actually function on all fours is, and we can't, when we crawl, it's so awkward and our legs are so much longer. So we have to like basically eliminate our knee all the way down to our feet in order for us to crawl. The extension on the front arms has to do with this vertically oriented scapula. That's what makes them so graceful and what makes that the legs and the arms the same length. It's the vertically oriented scapula. So let's see if we can find that. So we don't see the scapula because the head's in front of it, but we do get the upper arm. So the shoulder behind the head down into the elbow, and it's a backwards L. Then we get a, there's this little webbing that also helps transition from the forearm into the upper arm, lower arm. And then I don't know what you want to use. I'm leaning towards this cube right here. This is a foreshortened forearm. So this is basically functions almost like a drumstick. So you have all this muscle on the forearm and it leads into the wrist. And then that wrist turns, it's bent, runs vertical, wrist to knuckle. And then you get the fused finger. And then we have this nicely bent hoof. So I labeled them last time. So it was just I number them so I can find them again. So it's shoulder to elbow is 1, elbow to wrist, extremely foreshortened, number 2. Probably one of the most challenging, I would say the most uniquely challenging angles in the entire composition, at least so far. Then very two-dimensional, basically an exact, measured wrist to knuckle, 3, the fused finger, 4, and then the hoof, call it 5. In theory, the scapula would be back here by the eye. The head really does come over it. And just not to be too uncouth, but if you look at the deer in the background, you get the shoulder to the elbow, elbow to the wrist, wrist to knuckles, fused finger, and then the hoof. Look at how prominent the scapula is up there. So you can analyze that, and there's this rib cage. So this is the scapula really is an extension of that arm in a very very practical and I think very underestimated way. I mean, I've only kind of recently put that all together. Let's match up this left side. So we're going to get the shoulders into the biceps. You get the crease at the elbow. I'm going to use an actual backwards L for the elbow. And the forearm is less foreshortened here. And you get a beautiful, just a beautiful egg shape representing the density of that muscle in the forearm, which is very human-like. We get the wrist. And we're seeing a lot of like horse anatomy here. I don't know if you're drawing a bone or if we're drawing, the leg that's covered in fur, but they're very similar. So it's wrist to knuckles, and then I'll do the hourglass pinched finger into the hoof. And I love how these hooves are kind of pointed down. These hooves are kind of solidly on the ground. Whereas, and like you can imagine putting your hand flat on the ground versus lifting your hand up and then flat, flat, and then up, flat, and then bent at that wrist. And so these wrists are kind of, pointed down. And those are also just really beautiful forms. Yeah, really, really, they feel almost like, almost like a spade shape, like the back of a spade, or even like a coffee. You ever seen like a coffee, like an old-fashioned coffee scoop? Turn that upside down. Anyway, just an elegant form. All right. Let me think about this. Yeah, I think I'm right. Okay, so you want to follow, you get the Y shape of the sternum into clavicles, and then we have to get into the way he leads us up to the head. May be a little bit unnatural, but I'm just going to try and show the thing that I'm seeing. So I'm seeing two sides of this esophagus. So it's a very thick esophagus, Adam's apple. I'm going to just claim that it is a cylinder, partial cylinder. And then the key is that on either side of that would be the main muscle of sternocleidomastoid. So the way that this thing is like stretched aggressively, every neck, you can see it. There's the esophagus, the Adam's apple, whatever you want to call it. And then flanked on either side by the big neck muscle that allows for all the movement, at least side to side, sternocleidomastoid. And you're catching those. Those are like the thickening agents. There's like the main center, which gives you the center line of this, throat. And then you have the muscular structural support on either side of it. And that's really cool. Really cool. All right, so thank goodness I decided to do the pen, because what we're about to get into, I think I'm going to actually zoom in to decode this head, and this is it. I mean, if you don't get the stag's face, you're like, the whole piece, I feel like, falls apart. Everything else can be abbreviated, after that. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 major forms to the head. And then everything else is basically, you want to think about the main 4 structures I'm about to describe is like Mr. Potato Head. And then everything else is going to be like the pieces that you can attach to Mr. Potato Head that they can pull off and put on, and could be different sizes, could be different, genders, whatever you want to call it. Like those little pieces of Mr. Potato Head are accessories. The structure is the potato. And so what I'm going to do now is the potato, and then I think I have another colored pen or even a pencil, and we'll attach the other component parts. Okay, and they're 3D, and it's a 3D component, so this is going to be so fun. And this is the part that I felt like the most confident with in analyzing, before I even did this. So I'm happy with my look of the body, and so I can breathe easy now. All the hard work is done, ladies. This is good. All right, all the unknowns. Okay, so where we want to start, I think we want to start with the roll, which is a cylinder. This is the part of the antlers. This is a cylinder where it's underneath the skull. And again, I don't know if this is how these deer are actually constructed. I suspect that they probably are, but I honestly don't know because I just haven't studied it hard enough. So this is going to be a cylinder, and this cylinder is what springs forth our antlers. And I'm not even going to go do the antlers just yet. I'm just going to get them started. So there's like one triangular spoke on the left, one triangular spoke on the right, and then the antler is going to kind of come up the side. So I don't really want to get into that yet, because the antlers are an accessory. You can have long antlers, you can have huge antlers, you can have small ones, you can have little spikes, whatever. This guy's more full grown, so you can imagine that the skull structure has modified to be able to hold up such a huge antler rack. Okay, so out of that, we're going to get the trapezoid of the forehead. So we're going to build this front plane of the forehead, and the base of the forehead, I'm going to claim angles pretty steep, and it's actually at the same counter thrust as the spine. So if you come across the brow, it seems to coincide with the spine here. Nice. So that's the front of the forehead, and then we're going to get the side plane of the forehead. So the middle would be here. So it's like between the eyes, that's the center of that box. And then this is the side of the box. Now the light is coming from the left, so the side of the box is not in shadow. So this plane, I believe, is actually harder to see, which is so interesting. All right, and then I'm going to do the front plane, and this little angle here is where the eyes will live. So the forehead comes across, and then the brow tucks under. Then we're going to get the snout, which is basically the connection from the brow. It's basically the length of the nose. And this is the top trapezoid of the top of the nose, and then the side plane of that box. And do we see any of the side? No, we don't see any of this side. Now I'm going to use a cube for the front, and I'm going to call that snout. I'm going to call that snout a separate form. So this would be the middle of the eyebrows right here, the unibrow area, and then this is going to be the middle of the nostril. You have the bone structure of the nasal cap passage. So you would get, if you were to look at the bones, you would get a nostril flare on that side, a nostril on that side. So where there's a middle line, and you can if you look at a deer skull or even like feel on your own face, there is bone structure, and then it turns into cartilage. And this little line here is where the bone from the brow and the bone from the nose ends, and the soft cartilage tissue of that nasal cavity. And then the front, so that is the Mr. Potato Head. Cool. Mr. Bales is dreaming. Where's he running to? Pink show? Yes. The pink shows up. Okay, so now we just get to place our features. So on the front of that plane, you get the eyes. The very top corner, you get the nose. And that nose is going to turn down. You probably get a little bit of the mouth, underplane of the mouth. I'm not sure. The eyes, nose, mouth, and then finally ears. Nice. Look at that. Look at that. Okay. So I'm going to try and attach these ears. They go below, and I'm going to simplify it. They go below the antlers. And just like on this other side, we found that there was a structure portion where it attaches, and then they fan out, into almost like a tongue shape. Same on this side. You get that pinched, almost like a rectangle, and then they bend, and they turn into, the really two component parts. So then there's this cube, which attaches, and then it turns up and turns into that leaf shape or that disc shape, tongue shape, whatever you want to call it. And I really want to show that there's this deer shape. It almost feels like a tombstone, where you get the curved front face and then you get the thickness of that side. And it is there. So there's a very three-dimensional root of that ear, and then as it turns, it makes that cupping, the satellite dish that's able to capture the sound waves and redirect them, into the ear canal. Now this one, super interesting. I think I'm gonna force my concept onto it. So I might start with a rectangle and then add our little tongue shape. I was having a difficult time reading what is ear and what is background. It's not totally apparent. It looks like there's some thickness to that ear right there. Not sure. On a detail level, zoom in even further. So the middle of the forehead, it allows for a significant shadow. So like I said, the light is coming from this left part. And just like in humans, just like in horses, you have this big sausage brow ridge above the eye. And you see this big sausage on the left side as well, or the right side as well, to the point where like the eye is almost in profile, may actually even be in profile. Behind that, there's a little indentation at the temples, which you don't really see on the right side. I just really wanted you to be able to see that there's an eyebrow ridge structurally. And even though I made these planes, this is clearly the top of the nose. This is the side of the jaw. The details are much more graceful and elegant and curvy. You have the front of the nose and that thickness, and then you see the nostril flares go up, either side. There's this little delicate lip. There's not much to the mouth. There's really not much to the mouth, but these little, like the little arrow of that nose, again, with this being an arrow or a diamond shape between the brow, that shadow that insists on the bilateral symmetry, the middle, and then the pointed part of the nose insists on that symmetry as well. And I think in the geometry, some of the gracefulness of the face gets lost. And I didn't want, and you just got to be careful when you come back into it. A lot of these construction lines that show up in the purple will are not particularly useful. Conceptually, they're useful, but a lot of the marks on the body, the construction lines are going to translate really easily into the final drawing. I don't think I can say the same thing for the structure of the face. So, I mean, just look at I think I can fit them on the screen at the same time if I try. I mean, they're both true. They're not wrong. It's just the purple structure, is really not going to show up in the end. But you need to like, especially with this side plane, because I was talking about that, in the Hussein Bolt theory where, this guy's head is turned, it's turned extremely far. So the importance of this left side of the face, seeing the front of the forehead, you're seeing most of that, but then you're really adding a whole section to the left side of the face all the way down. And that will make that turn. I think part of what was challenging about the last one was getting this neck to really turn. And the turning, definitely exists in the neck here, but it is further supported by having the 3/4 view of the face. Zoom out. Not bad, huh?
No.
How are we doing? Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to shortchange you. Let's do those antlers. I haven't smudged my whole drawing yet. And antlers are kind of like accessories, but what wonderful accessories they are. Yeah. So it appears that there's the dance that happens between the antlers. So what we started with last week, we did the arc of the forehead, the skull, and then I don't know if I fully acknowledged the extension of the head, to hold up this rack. So there's the left side spoke, the right side spoke. Then it continues up, singular right side spoke, singular left side spoke. Then we come up through the bottom, out of the skull, hit our little fish hook antler on that side. We're going to roll up here. Less of a fish hook, a little more like a leaf. That's all right. I'm going to make it more fish hooky. Then we'll come again, back up, get a nice little fish hook antler on the inside right, fish hook antler on the inside left, and then into the tip here, I followed one consistent line all the way to the tip, and then flanked that by two other points. So this last one, I'll come up through the center and then flank it with 2 points. Okay, that was a quick review with no lighter shade or anything, just like running down, the basic anatomy of the antler. And our guy is slightly more complex, the white stag, that is. So I'm looking here. So we have the roll of the cylinder. We have two major points. And after those two major points, it seems as though there's like a long passage, a large U-shaped passage that leads up to the a whole flame-like set of spokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 spokes all in the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we got 5 on each side. Slightly less spread out. But it's nice to have this kind of like numerical association. There's 2 flame-like hooks that angle inside, and then there's the main central tip, and then there's one that runs out the outside. Very interesting. I really want these tips to kind of feel like they're attacking each other. It's almost like 2 battling flames. I'm reminded of that. There's that old classic Disney movie where there's like this match, I think, or anyway, there's this guy that's battling these flames, and the fire like starts to take over, and it's like this little entity. Anyway, it's so interesting. Oh my gosh, you are the best. Thank you. No, it looks like it's hot. It might be too hot.
90 seconds.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Kristen. That might be just the fuel I needed. I needed a little burst of a little sip of courage over here. Left side, right side, left side, right side. Yeah, I'm looking at if you look at the overall nature of the racks, this is a dark, they conform to the nature of the stags, the dark stag backlit versus the white stag front lit. All right, I'm just gonna stop fascinating, but it is helpful to talk your way through it sometimes.
Yeah.
And then since I bent my paper, it's harder to see through it. All right, we've got our our first big point, left side, right side. We're going to follow our long U-shape extension. We'll get 2 hooks on the inside. And then I'm sorry. Let me move to a flatter area. Too many wrinkles. Okay, great. So do the cylinder of the roll. I don't need to overthink this. 1 major point, left side, right side. And we'll follow this extension up to our first hook, and then our second hook. And it looks like there might be a little background hook there. Yeah, there's this little nub right here. It's not very prominent. The U-shaped antlers roll up all the way to the final tip, which feels almost like a talon. And then there's a little guy behind him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, this next one, way lower. Very interesting. All right, so we're going to do the long inside loop, U-shaped loop into 2 hooks, 1 hook, 2 hooks. Our prominent final tip. And then we'll come up this long U-shaped bottom, and we'll get a small hook and then another small hook. It almost feels like a mace, like that a medieval weapon. Sometimes a sword or a block, but it had all these spikes at the end. Long handle. Anyway, this guy has all of his antler tips bunched at the end after this like long passage of a handle. There's no doubt. I mean, I can just move these over. The white stag's antlers are, I'd say, 20% larger. So not only are the antlers larger, but they're technically further away. So and that was my last point as we enter in, as we considered doing this sketch. This level of analysis, when you do it like this, the analysis portion, like the construction lines, practically draw themselves. Like we're going to be able to sketch this in so fast, just how it kind of should be. There'll be very few structural blind spots, and then we'll get to spend the rest of the time almost decorating it. The baking of the cake is the part that you really can't get wrong, because you don't want the cake to taste bad. But once you have a delicious cake, then you have this freedom to refine it and polish it and decorate it, and you can just keep going. You almost can't over decorate it, because the cake is going to taste great. So I think this investment in construction, I think, is really going to be worth it. And having drawn my stag a couple times now. I may have to zoom out a little bit further so I have enough real estate, so forgive me. I think I can get away with that's this. I'm gonna cut off a good chunk more. I don't want to run out of room.
Can't hear you very well, Trevor. There.
Yeah, sorry about that. I think I might have been mumbling to myself. Oh, not bad. So this is kind of neat. This is like kind of in a real world application, because when I did my interpretation of this deer, I didn't make it exact, and it never could be exact, nor should it be exact. But I have to make my second deer proportional, and I think that's where we're faced with that. That's the challenge we're kind of faced with initially, and then once we get the deer kind of blocked in with our construction lines, be it like larger or smaller, whatever it is, I think the stress levels should drop. I'm even reassessing the nature of my drawing from last week, and it looks like my thighs are a lot longer, and because of that, I've got a taller deer, and so because of that, I'm going to have a taller white stag, because there have to be because I'm looking at the contact points, and so the size and scale of my initial the first deer is going to have a profound impact on the size of my second deer. I really like that. All right, so does anybody have any questions at this point?
I have a question about the antlers, but I guess when we get there, I could ask it as well. It just looks like there is some foreshortening, because from our perspective, the deer's right antler looks sort of shorter, or
Yeah, so no, that's interesting. So and I think I know where we're going. If you imagine so you're looking at somebody straight on, both eyes are the same distance from you. Then as soon as I turn my head this way, my right eye is actually closer to you than my left eye.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the camera further distorts that.
yeah.
And the artist can also accentuate that to give that illusion of depth. So that being said, our deer, his head is turned looking to our right, his left.
Yeah.
So this eye is bigger than that eye because it's closer to us. This nostril is larger. So this antler, in theory, should be bigger than this one because of the perspective, because of this antler being closer to us because of the way the head's turned. Now, that's the only part of the body that's like that, except no, the ear should be that way too. But this leg, his left leg is closer to us because his torso is turned this way, the opposite way. So this side is going to be bigger than that side, where because the head is turned so aggressively, now the left side is now larger than the right side. And it should be that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That makes sense. Right?
Yeah. It's just there's so much twisting and turning. Some things I find myself drawing them the same, but then I realize, oops, no, this really has to be shorter than the other one. And the antler is lower than the other one, but in fact, it's forward. Yeah, when we get there, I'm sure we'll deal with that.
Yeah, and then on top of it, to add insult to injury, the dark marks in here are thicker and darker, and they're surrounded by like what's called a halo, a light halo. So the leaves in the background are undertreated, whereas this antler back here is competing with this antler as well as a darker textured background. So this antler is both larger and in higher contrast and in more prominence, and then this antler is cropped and surrounded by dark notes and smaller. So not only is it actually smaller, but it's more camouflaged. So the prominence of this antler on this side of the face is 2 to 1, maybe even 4 to 1 more prominent. And so the tendency so again, we'll get there. But like, look, I would make the same argument for the ear. It's larger and more and has more movement. That being said, this lower antler, look at the detail in that, and like the light and the shade, and like, that is a much more refined component. So, it's not that like the left side and the right side are universally disproportionate. There is like an intentional design balancing act that he's playing. Oh man, here we go. All right. So my analysis. If you think about it, like there's so few shapes down here. It's so nice. It's so nice. So what I'm really doing is I'm really drawing this. I'm drawing my purple lines right now first. So that is the goal. And then from those purple lines, which we know are 100% accurate because we trace it, you draw those purple lines, then we'll be able to come back and analyze the and then what's called draw the drawing. I'm gonna do it. Let's do it. Almost there, team. Okay. All right, so I've got my semicircle. Nice, impressively steep little arc of the pelvis right there. And then the inside of the pelvis and the inside of that knee match up perfectly. I've got the very elegant webbing on that inner part of the thigh. And attempt to get the right angle of the spine and see how that transitions into the oval of the rib cage. Stunning. And then this relative what so this is the part where it does get tricky because I'm building I'm not copying the size of my shapes. I'm copying the proportional relationship of the size of the shapes. So I've got my pelvis up here, which is huge, compared to the actual shape. If I were to cut out this shape with scissors and cut out the shape of my drawing of the pelvis, they would be very different sizes. I want them to be proportional. So I want them to like the height width ratios to match up. So and then if there's any, so it's the height width ratio. So I've got my knee, the trapezoid from knee to ankle. And I'm looking at the distance between, this ankle and the existing ankle from the dart stag. And then this really beautiful hourglass shape that's at an angle this way. Now, the only thing I have to do is pray that my drawing, the way I'm orienting my tracing is actually balanced. I think I'm pretty close. And I've got my hoof. And that lines up with my hoof on the other side. Definitely close enough. Yes. My rib cage. So it goes over. I'm a little bit nervous about the order here because going from the known into the unknown, one has to, the distance between the hips and the rib cage needs to be considered. The distance between the back of the rib cage and where the brow intersects it. That is really an important part. So I'll get the front angle of the forehead, the sunglasses, establishing the middle of the forehead, the middle of the unibrow, the middle of the snout. Almost anticipating that round part, but I don't want to do too much. And then the front of the snout, that cube. I've got the roll of the antlers and the extension and the accessories. I gotta get the side of the head, and then the side of the snout, leading into the side of the muzzle. So because I really want to orient the head to the rib cage, and I want to make sure that this rib cage does match up, I'm looking at the scapula leading into the middle of the sternum, scapula there, and I can see this aggressive esophagus or throat really turning the corner, and then seeing the profile of the neck on both sides of sternocleidomastoid. It's wonderful. The pectorals, I was studying horses for this Preakness piece. Oh, I got to show you my Preakness painting. I think it looks pretty good. I think it's not finished, but I think I'll be able to pull it off. I don't know if I'll win, but at least I'll finish it.
It's a contest?
Yeah, it's a contest for the Preakness or what I don't know, the
Yeah.
race where you like, I think you win like $4,000 and you can you get like VIP tickets
Whoa.
to the race and stuff. And then they instead of hiring a graphic design company for like $50,000 to do their promos,
Right.
they get to sample the public, but it's for my Tuesday night oil painting class. It's really been very fruitful. So we studied horses, we studied black-eyed Susans. We got these really beautiful arrangements of black-eyed Susans over the last, we probably spent 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks.
Neat.
It's been a really interesting painting adventure. So I'm very thankful that they did it. And like sometimes there's the nice, like a motivator, like a nice,
Yeah.
a deadline motivator, and then also like, competition motivation. There's nothing wrong with making art for competition every once in a while.
Right.
There's so many reasons to make art. For pure joy is good. Devotion is good. Competition is good.
Making a living.
Earning money. Yeah. Contributing to cultural enhancement, moving the species forward. There's all kinds of reasons to do it.
I don't know.
Okay, so by this eye here, I'm putting this little indication just because I feel like I need to acknowledge the scapula, and then we'll do the the triceps and the biceps, near the deltoids, and then get our elbow. And then even if you just use a small rectangle, I mean, just the height width ratio of the elbow, it's that simple. And then we'll do the, the drumstick shape of his wrist to knuckle. And I'm going to extend his hoof a little bit, which may or may not be a good move, but I'm thinking that the, they're so beautiful and the hooves are so commanding. There's just something very strong about a hoof to me. When you see a horse like a Clydesdale or something, I feel like you can't make the hooves too big. I mean, you don't want it to look like a horse, but you also want it's got to fit with the species, and even it's the species or even the genus. But anyway, we'll have time. All of these are all construction lines, so the deviations and the aesthetic variations that we can put in here are all, everything's still subject to change. I guess that's my point. All right, deltoid, biceps, or scapula, deltoid, biceps. Got our little drumstick, our elbow, and then the wrist to knuckles. And then it starts to turn hourglass into a kind of a curving triangular hoof. This is where but the way I drew it right now, the hoof on the right is disproportionately large compared to the one on the left. You can make a case for distance, but it doesn't hold up because it feels like this poor deer has like a miniature foot. So you have to be in the same ballpark. We've got some accessories. The antlers. First spoke. First split. Long U shape. And because of the scale of my deer, if you look at the way my antlers are, they are kissing more so than overlapping compared to the drawing. I may really have to not do the antlers until, not use my analysis, use the actual photos. Good analysis, I should say. I like that they're kind of tangled like that. Look at my two little bunches right here. I kind of like mine better. We'll see what the implications are. All right, there's my analysis. Let's see what we got. They fit? Almost fits. Zoom out even more. Oh no, I can do this. Okay, let me cut that down. Now they fit on there. Okay. I mean, look at it's such good raw material. I'm not saying that I can't go wrong, because of course there's always potential for now we get to draw the drawing. So I think I'm going to start the initial sketch with kind of zoomed out a little bit, so we can see both full figures. Because as we move forward, I have a feeling when we compare the lightness of the white stag to the darkness of the standing stag, we're going to need to darken one so that this appears to be lighter. And this is where our background is really going to come in. We haven't really been faced with any values per se in the background, because our drawing was just able to hold up with silhouette lines and shadow lines and texture lines. But this white stag, and nothing had to really stand out. It was a dark figure on a lighter background, and that's still the case with the standing stag. But now the new condition that comes into play is the white stag, and we have to make the white of the paper shine through. So how do you make the white of the paper stand out? Well, you have to shade everything else around it. So the background, especially around him, is gonna really matter if we want the white stag to appear to be white and not compete with the rest of the page. Of course, that doesn't, you don't have to conform. You don't have to conform to that. like if you wanted to keep the background white, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But just what makes this picture work is the fact that all the lightest areas of the picture are in this deer, and the way that the paper appears to be light is because of the tones that exist all the way around him. And that might be, I think that's going to be a fun exercise. There's really not that much texture around our standing stag anyway. So it's not like we have to modify him very much. Sweet. I'm really excited about this. In the way that we have construction lines, when they're no longer necessary or they need to be replaced, let's do that. So the separation between the pelvis and the thigh, there's no linear separation there. There are some ridges along this back end, and what I have found, and what I think we like played into last week, is how he manages his silhouettes in terms of having thick lines, and more so than having thick and thin lines, but having like intentionally pulsing lines. So when you have a singular line, there's always a variation in it. It's never exactly smooth. So I'm climbing up from the tail of the standing stag, and I'm coming up into the pelvis. There's what's called a passage line. So the tail has a light side and a shadow side, but the pelvis, even though it's immediately behind the tail, the line actually doesn't connect. It's broken. So the tone that exists in the pelvis of the stag and the background behind both of those deer are the same value. One side bleeds in, and you don't even know where that separation happens. And then it goes, dark, convex, slow, concave, convex, swells down, concave, and then back up again. And my deer is the torso of my deer is way larger, so I need to do some invention. And I think I called that earlier. I mean, my pelvis was larger, then the separation between my pelvis and my rib cage was larger. Again, where and how this rib cage turns. I talked initially about the webbing, but that webbing actually continues and extends almost all the way to the elbow. And there's also another top plane, up here. So there is, my deer is way too long. And I'm not that upset about it. Like I said, I mean, you can have there's a whole range of saltiness that is tolerable when you smoke bone marrow. And, there's a whole range of lengths of torsos when you sketch deer. I'm just nervous that my deer feels like he's way closer. Like the antlers it doesn't look like at the moment that the antlers could naturally connect because of how much larger my deer is. It's all good. We're gonna have some muscles in the thigh, which help offer some enclosures. This is this thigh, flips in. Oh, wow. Very interesting, transition here at the knee. We haven't really seen the front of the knee yet. It looks like it makes almost like this little volcano, this little cylindrical volcano. And as the as you know, everybody's used to applying more. But remember that, you know, taking out, removing lines is like equally as important, especially when this kind of robotic deer, it feels so unnatural, and it's the straight lines that were required to get the planes and the structure. But it's to get the feeling of it being natural, they have to be, you know, removed. Some like gentle hatch marks in here for the shadows. There's the deer almost seem like they share a silhouette, and I don't, it could be coincidence, it could be on purpose, but if you think in one, if you put on one lens, this back thigh can be defined, you know, this line here defines the back of the standing deer. But then if you see it, if you put on another lens, you know, you draw the front of this thigh, it could almost double as the back of the rearing stag. So this one line is almost like this thing could in fact be like an exact silhouette of each of them. And that is kind of an interesting, it's kind of interesting. And I played up the white-tailed deer, you know, characteristics in, you know, when I was at school. I'm not sure if I did it in, no, I obviously didn't do it in this drawing. The ones I did later, I put that big kind of fluffy triangular classic North American deer, white-tailed deer tail. And it looked great. So it's kind of like whenever you draw a bunny rabbit, you'd be surprised how often the you know, people leave out the cotton ball tail. You know, it's just, everyone gets overwhelmed by the characteristic nature of the flopsy ears or the rabbit ears and the teeth. And then, you know, the next characteristic aspect of a deer, of a bunny rabbit, is the tail. And I think you could make the same case for, you know, deer. You know, you do the antlers, but then you have this very unique and very beautiful, you know, tail. You know, of course, these aren't white-tailed deer, but still, we can make it. We can always make it our own. So we go knee, another series of passage lines. So the upper knee, the lines blend together, they make contact. Both top and bottom of this ankle are disconnected from contact. You know, there's a light halo against this. So that's, I think that might be why, you know, last week we drew the whole deer, then it wasn't until the very end that I noticed that there was even a leg in there. Those passage lines, and just for those of you who obviously this group knows it, but passage lines are lines with which the artist attempts to show separation between objects that are in front of the other. So by having these lines disappear and not make contact, that creates the illusion of depth and an atmosphere in between these objects. I call it almost like a parlor trick for drawing, but you know, it works every time. Really beautiful. That ankle between is just such a really elegant collection of marks. I'm not doing it justice at all. I might actually erase it and do it again, because almost abstractly, they're very beautiful marks, and they really tell so much about the inside of that. And then as almost as detailed and as considerate as he was on this ankle and the relationship of that ankle to the ankles that are in front of it, the abbreviated hoof is, I'm not gonna say it's comical, but he got away with a lot with very little. I mean, I think you could even argue that that hoof might be just a singular line, might be just one vertical edge, because the all the marks on the bottom are the texture of the forest floor, and then the left side doesn't even, there's not enough, the thickness of the standing leg is so prominent that the right side of the hoof is almost passaged out of the picture. It's great. I believe this is the front of the pelvis right here. This would be the buried acis. You know, this would, when you stand up in a human, this anterior superior spine, yeah, is visible. Apparently, it's a little bit visible here too. So here's the hourglass, you know, where the concavity of the spine, the concavity of the webbing enter into the fullness and egg-shaped nature of the ribs. And you know, my ribs might be a little bit swollen. I think I was overemphasizing their egg shape. So if I smooth that out, I can make it look a little more deer-like and less bullish. Wonderful. My lines for the arms are no longer necessary because the muscles of the shoulders are so kind of close to and streamlined on the rib cage that they don't separate really until you get down into what would be called the armpit, but really the armpit is closer to the elbow, when the limbs really separate from the body. The left side of the cube, I've got the top plane of that bicep, and then I got the back plane. So it's a really nice set of dark marks right there in that upper arm, left side, corner, right side, and that right side then transitions into the elbow. Really delightfully suggesting the mass of the cube, without not smacking you across the face with geometry. The forearm faces away and down from the light source. So we're going to roll and show the shadow of the bottom of that egg. Really clarify it with a silhouette line that's nice and dark, which disappears behind the underside of that wrist. You know, the wrist pinches in so tight. I mean, it almost turns into one singular line. And because of my hooves are larger, I can scale up a little bit. But it is impressively dainty. The narrowness of that front of the back of the hand. Beautiful little teardrop transitioning into the, ooh, there is a split hoof. Yes. Just a little arrow at the bottom. It's almost lost. Yeah, they do have little split toes. So all of my, I had built this sternum, and if you look at it's almost more like a Mitsubishi sign. I think this is Mitsubishi. right? I think that's what it is. So there is a center line, but the center line is not as prominent as the sides of that triangle. And me instilling that triangle in there, that's still way too many construction lines. But it's a beautiful arrow that helps lead you from the neck into the chest, and then the chest into the bottom. I was mentioning earlier on, I kept talking about it, but the pectorals, on humans, you stand up and the pecs are really high, and that's true. But on these animals, they're not only in the front; they actually go way under. They're longer, and they start at the front plane, and then they really go underneath the bottom, at least according to this anatomy book that we were looking at for the horses. So I assume, the pectorals must be the same for a deer. Shoulder, the deltoid into the bicep. My little looks like my knee needs to be kicked up a little bit higher. And then there seems to be a little bit of a separation. There's really a prominent little orb for the elbow as we lead into the forearm. And then there does seem to be a little bit of gap in between the torso and the back of the arms there. Could be a passage moment. And some marks, showing how the chest and the arms really merge into the same thing. I'm wondering if this is the actual center here, and we've got pec on this side and pec on this side. That feels like it makes more sense to me now. Really working that turn. That kind of universal suggestion of light and shade, just by darkening the lines. You have this joint kicks in. You have this looks like this little extension of the toe. The whole underplane is a dark line. The whole upper plane is the thinnest, even broken line to being the light side. And this is where, it's almost just a tone. It's not even like a line. It's just like this kind of gray moment. There is, definitively a dark halo. So I hadn't made much of it at the moment, yet. But the silhouette lines are dark, but they are reduced in terms of their intensity because they're up against this textured gray background. And I'm just using a kind of like a generic, tone and mark making that, is worked with my pencil. I mean, I'm just using regular graphite. I'm using chalk. So the nature of the marks in the background might be a little bit different, but you can follow the same movements and get, achieve the same effect. It really requires some background. The back leg, I'm really excited to get into the face, but The back leg is full of passage. Most of the back leg lines are disconnected from the belly. And there's a moment where the webbing transitions into the soft underbelly, which is in shadow. And that thigh transitions into the knee, uniquely in the back, in the back, with the knee in the front, and then you get some King's tendons transitioning into that ankle, and you have the heel, watching it turn the corner, and raising it back on the front into the front. At this stage, I feel like I have, a lot of control in my pencil, and a lot of my eye is tuned to the thickness and the darkness of every section. So whatever side of the shape I'm thinking we've plotted, you can, because you have the shape there, you can draw the drawing, meaning, the transition from one shape to another. You can look at those lines, determine whether they're curvy, determine whether they're straight, whether they remain thick or they become thinner, or even break in some points, maybe even dissolve into just a tone. It's the diversity of the mark making that makes the picture throb and pulse and feel like there's movement, and where there's movement, there's life. And where there's twisting and turning, there's action. So he's using all kinds of devices, but just on a connoisseurship level, like on this refinement of the details. The marks are just so brilliant. And it can be observational, which can determine it, but it can also be conceptual, meaning that you're throwing a line hierarchy, and you're insisting on a variation where no variation might even exist, in observation. So it's really a combination of both of those things, both drawing what you see, but then coming up with a system to help you get enough variation when you're drawing simply what you know. I think that's what art is. And my order, I don't think I really considered the order. You're drawing the way I am, and you're right-handed. I've been keep inching closer and closer, and this whole leg down here is kind of getting smudged. And as I move up into the head and the antlers, I run the risk of smudging it. So you can just put a little piece of tracing paper down, and it does eliminate the friction. It reduces visibility slightly, but it's worth it. I'm wondering if like this initial cylinder that I built for where the antlers come out, I wonder if there's like little like tufts of hair there. I mean, it's not bone. I think it's got like a little this miniature mop top. Um, dogs especially, they have these, these little gullies in between, their eyes. The eye, with building this, sausage in here, this breakfast sausage of the eyebrow ridge. Somehow he's able to capture the upper eyelid, corner of the eye, the pupil. He's got so much in there. And so the inside of the sausage is in shadow, and then this little gully, this little, diamond shape between, the antlers, and then between each brow. That's what that shadow is. I don't think it's a patch. I think it's an actual shadow. Eyebrow ridge, the sausage, wonderful. Eyelid. That eye is truly silhouetted. Just another wonderful angle. So the eye, you're seeing the eye is silhouetted up against the back. It's not inside the head. Angle down from the eye, the lower eyelid, and then the line thins out, and then he darkens that, reestablishing it into the nostrils of the nose. He's got a little mustache underneath there. And then he's got the lips that are on the front of the snout, and then it turns the corner and goes back up. So, I started from the middle and I came down and I established both eyes, at least the relationship between the two eyes. Then I came down the profile, the silhouette, the lost profile of the face, and was able to, pronounce my nose. And I did the front of the snout, and then I turned the corner. So I could go back up the edge, the jawline, back up into the ear, and I will. But I'm also going to come back up to where I started again, because I came down, then I did one side. I'm going to start back again and just make sure I'm oriented properly. So I have the start of my antlers, and then I have the base of my ear, and then the jawline is going to actually go, disappear or passage behind that ear. Great. And then it comes down, it turns the corner. And it really is a prominent jaw. And it pinches in, and we're seeing the side of the snout. So the side of the head, side of the snout. And there's a deep inner part of the neck, deepest inner part of the neck. That shows that there is a kind of like a gully back there. Which is different from the muscles on the pecs. Let me just finish these ears, or I'll sit back for a second and assess what happened. So the silhouette of the forehead is able to pop out because of the dark background, and then the forehead comes in front of the ear. So the ears turn, this ear may be experiencing a cast shadow from the head. And that's why it's so dark. also angled towards the ground. So the bottom will be darker lines, and then the top, very, very faint lines. And above that will be our antlers. So I'm copying the marks, but I'm also really naming these things. That's that ear. You know, the cup or the disc angles to the ground. So this little line here is the cavity. And then the background and the ear where it enters into the head kind of blend together into one kind of dark shape. All right, I love that on my second pass, I found that there was like a little, almost like a little extender block. You can kind of see where the, you know, like the base to the base even. And then we see the inside lip of the ear. We'll see the outside back end of the ear. And we'll see the left side of the ear, which is full of broken lines. Top of that brow ridge does not need to be, does not need to have these construction lines. So it looks like I have all the right parts to the face, but it looks like I may have just made the snout a little too long. So being more in touch with the line weight, having had this week in between and the practice, and then having something to compare it to. So I haven't, we just did one deer, and you know, the deer looked, you know, the contrast of our first deer seemed to really work. But now that we've got two, you have something to compare to, because in the sense of, you know, it is relative. These values, the lights and the darks, are relative to one another. And you know, there's this like exciting contrast between these dark, deep notes, and you know, there are gray tones, but the gray tones are way less significant. And there are, you know, these bold light areas of the white stag. And the contrast that exists in this deer, the one that we just drew, you know, kind of shines a spotlight, no pun intended, on the first one. And at least in my drawing, revealed how low contrast. And you know, I don't know if you guys went and saw the post, but I posted your all's drawings of the first stag. And one thing that I noticed immediately was how you all noticed the degree of contrast, and you know, and participated in it. And mine, you know, all my values were very close together. Perhaps I was in some instinctual way anticipating the ultimate comparison. I don't know, I doubt it. I think I just was able to make my light darks relational to itself, not relational to, you know, this new you know, component, which is the second year. So, and just so I can attempt to achieve some unity, I'm just doing a quick pass on the deer from last week and punching it. punching those darks, so that I can have a more, kind of a more accurate relationship between these two elements. And again, not even considering, really the rest of the picture, even just these two components. These contrasts that I'm establishing now here, those are all, going to be key markers for the rest of the picture. All the other characters that are in the background and the trees and everything else, because there's nothing in the tree that is as thick and as dark as these antlers. I mean, these antlers are the zone 1 contrast. The darkness of this guy's head and the lightness of his head, that's the contrast, and nothing else in the rest of the picture will be able to compete with it by design. I mean, I don't know why in what world I thought I could get away with making, this year so light. And there's some really impressive. And, and the gray that I'm referring to is, the darks that I'm referring to is the gray of the pencil. If you're using charcoal or, or using compressed charcoal or pen, those other medium are able to go, significantly darker. This pencil has a really nice range of lights and darks, and it can go pretty dark. But if you think about the range of values between, 1 and 9, 9 being the darkest, the graphite pencil, ends at like maybe a 7, 7.5, 7.9, something like that. So you just have to work with what you got, I guess is what I'm saying. And the deer, the antlers, I think are, my instinct with the antlers is I really want them done fast. And I think it has to do, it's a similar concept with like hands or fingers. In order to do it justice, they all have to be considered. And there's so many of them that you're like, there's enough where it can kind of boggle the mind. But if you go slow and steady, they'll resolve themselves eventually. But instead, it's like a task that you think should take 2 minutes actually takes 20. There's an internal conflict, and you get anxious. So it's like 11:40 right now. So I mean, even if I in my mind, I'm saying I want the antlers done in 5 minutes. I think I'm going to zoom in and do them justice and spend 10 minutes on each. Something like that. Yeah, I think it's a mentality kind of thing.
Yeah, I think my antlers seem to be off a little bit. I keep adjusting and adjusting.
I mean, even these, I feel like these need to come. They need to hook even more.
Well, that's what I did. They're more bendy. They kind of curve in instead of going up.
Yeah. So it's like you go ear tip to ear tip, and then tip to tip, tip to tip. Like you can get this. You can get these consistent parallel lines, and then you would do the same thing, like eye to eye. I mean, look at this. Just me going through and doing that quick, assessment. This eye needed to drop lower.
Right.
then that brow ridge would drop lower, and then ear base to ear base, top of ear to top of ear, and then roll of the head, tip, tip, tip. Whoa, nice. And I think that's pretty consistent with, those vectors are and match. And I could even trim down my nose a little bit. Oh God. By dropping that eye, I'm able to like trim the snout, and that might make him look less, less different. I mean, my head was like way too big. All right, hold on, I'll be right back. And then I'll finish these antlers. And then, and one of the tricks too, the background can seem a little bit overwhelming, but just as you're working on the antler or in the back, or the ear in the back, just throw in, just notice the background.
Yeah.
And start to plop that in there. You've got these dark lines on the underbelly, they layer nicely. And then there's a little hatching going on. But make that their foliage in the background. So in a weird way, they're actually like super teeny marks, like really small marks. Smaller seeming. You want the background marks to be proportional, as if it were anything else. And you don't want to deviate too much, but the background will resolve itself. I mean, my drawing already looks so much better, having done a little bit of the background in the quote spaces between, the space between his legs, elbow and knee, knee to knee, antler to antler. Okay. Yes, I think we will have victory. No, I didn't go anywhere. Come back. Mr. Bales needs to go get some water. I'm wondering if he's got this silhouetted eye over on the right side too. That would make sense. I love that he would like, it's almost like they're staring at each other. All right, I'm zooming in. Zooming in on the zoom. Man, this is really good. He did such a good job. Paulus Potter. He's a funny guy. He's a funny guy. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this little Mitsubishi symbol. So it's interesting. I mean, I'm happy with the placement of the scale of my antlers. So I think the hard part is just getting something to represent where they are. And this is, you have to draw, you have to just make the sketch. So we got the hair. There's a kind of this moment where the hair ends and the antlers begin. So I like that, finding that spot. And we'll do, because the light's coming from the left, the starting on the right side is helpful in the sense that you could make you can make the lines a little heavier. So there's a little bit more, you don't have to be as subtle. So this is, oh, those turn the corner. Get this little flame guy. And we'll have the main body, and that main body transitions into another flame, which feels so much like a fish hook to me. Or a what would it look like? S curves. Enters back into this little crux of the V. And then it's going to turn. That's really nice. And that strangely disappears. So I could add more if I wanted to, but I'm going to attempt to stick with my guns. Shaded inside, very thin and broken left side silhouette. Oh, there's one extra one little guy. Yeah, these flames. I hadn't had a separate association. And I think the flame does it. I think that's the right connection. Or right, it's not connection, but association. There's this little crevice, this dark note in between the ear and the antler. I'm picking up my lines back here. We are offered a little bit more, we have a little bit more work. Like the way he was drawing the black chalk, it's like a duller. So you can make larger marks and therefore you can cover areas faster. So we have these little delicate pencil lines. So we get more precision, but we don't get kind of like single gestural strokes. So if there's a thick line, we have to kind of draw that line because 3 or 4 times to thicken it up. One pencil stroke doesn't manage it. So we sacrifice a little bit with having to do a little bit more work, but then we also gain because we have more control. So where it gets problematic is that you make a mark, it's in the right place and it's seemingly doing all the right stuff, but it just is not thick enough because the pencil's not thick enough. And it's not your fault. You just have to like go back in and refine the line. So as far as like the quick, fluid, gestural, single stroke nature that he's actually able to achieve, We don't get that because we have a different drawing material. You could, in theory, if you're working on a smaller scale, but we'd be working so small. Yeah, I just don't think that that's very practical. So just be nice to yourself and don't be as critical, because that's the conditions that we're working in, which are different. All right, so the hair kind of ends, and then we get this first spoke, which is a very light line, followed by a very dark, deep shadow side of that antler. Interesting teardrop corner of that relationship to the antler. And then it flames up, and that's where I could actually extend. I could make my guys my first one's antlers a little bit bigger so that they could actually overlap in the right spot. Look at that. It's these interesting spirals. I don't want to deviate too much from my sketch, but I'm trying to bridge the gap between the proportions of the white stag's antlers to each other versus the white stag antlers to the battling stag. One, two, three. These back end antler points are all in shadow. And then the front ones have a light side and a shadow side. They're exposed to the light. Classic fashion. I forgot to consider the background here. It's a little background texture. And by putting in the background, it makes you realize how heavy you can actually go with your lines, because when you make your own dark line and when it's up against white, that's a misperception. I mean, the contrast relationship is correct, but according to the drawing, it's not the right relationship, because as soon as you put in a background tone, what you thought was a dark line, the contrast reduces and it's no longer dark because it's not being compared to white, it's being compared to gray. And so by putting in these little spiral background notes, you may wind up needing to do a little bit more work internally. Darkening your lines so that you can reestablish the proper contrast relationship. That's what happened with my deer's ear here. It felt like it was plenty dark, but not when it's up against the gray background. These little spirals are very meditative, very pleasing. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Let me do a final check on my antlers, make sure I've got a good healthy contrast. And I think one of the things that's going to really unify our drawing is kind of bringing together the spaces between, and giving the background a believable backdrop. So where the stags intersect and overlap is a connection, probably the most important connection. but establishing a backdrop with the texture of the forest will bring them together even more into the same space. And it doesn't have to be everywhere. But if you do it on the left side, do it on the right side, and then it can expire, you know, it can end pretty quickly. But you don't want the one stag to have, you know, all this background and then have your other one have nothing.
Thank you, Trevor. I have to go.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Can you will you text me a picture of it?
Sure, will do.
All right.
Bye,
cool.
everybody.
Bye, Stephanie.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, too bad. I wanted to see Stephanie.
Hopefully she sends it. She's good at it. So when she sends it, I'll you know, I'll-
Share.
now I'm wondering if not immediately addressing the background, you know, drawing the calf and then doing the background, like the calf doesn't count unless it has a relationship with the background. I don't know. I feel like we had I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, the drawing's pretty nice. But that is true. I do wonder if it would have saved us some effort. You know, if we established the background a little sooner. I don't know. Okay. I did receive a text message, and I'm assuming it's from Steph. Let's have a look. Are we in a position to show?
Oh, sure.
I guess we have to be. It's 12. Whoa, cool. There it is though.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Mm.
Wow, look at that movement. There it goes. Oh yes.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah,
Wow.
I love the spontaneity of her lines.
Yeah.
me too. Yeah, I mean, if, it feels like so my yeah, it just feels like the movement feels a little playful, more playful than
In a fight. Yeah.
combative.
Right.
You know, like you know when you see puppies and they're like play fighting and or dogs
Yeah.
that are play fighting.
Right.
That reminds me of the dog park. That's great. Yeah, and there is something to be said about coming in from last week, and she got really wonderful contrast. You know, there's a clear identity between the value system of the right one versus the left one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
only-
antelope and the antlers being so you know, the lines she used for the antlers makes them look like they're moving.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Way more. I mean, and they feel resolved. Like it doesn't feel unfinished even. Yeah, I could have, the only other thing I would want to see is like this ground plane extended over a little bit. So this doesn't feel like it's floating as much. But yeah, even without the background, because the object is lighter and the dark silhouettes, you still get this yin yang feel of the dark to light. Yeah, definitely a yin yang. All right. What can I use?
Trevor, I have to go too.
Can I stop this? Do you have a minute to just show?
Well, it's not complete. I've got a lot left to do. Is my camera still blurry?
It's on there.
Oh, really nice.
Yeah, you got
Oh,
it
very
too.
nice.
Looks so good.
Oh, I love the smoky feel of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very different.
He's got a big chest and a skinny little butt, so I'm not sure if the proportions are right, but
Oh, it looks right.
Yeah, broad shoulders. Everything feels just right.
well,
And a lot of unity in there. Cool. Oh, look at your giraffe.
What's that?
All right. You got your little giraffe in the background. It's cute.
oh yeah, my little giraffe.
All right, Adele, can we see yours?
Oh, nice. Really nice. Well, you can sure see the movement.
Yeah, you really can. There's a real sense of environment happening. You know what I mean? It feels like
Yeah, your background is filled in. That's what's making it feel like it's real. I got a
yeah,
lot.
and even like unintentionally, the rectangle, having so much rectangle.
Yeah,
It has nothing to do with the size of the object. It has to do with how it's cropped. So like having it zoomed out, it just it feels like a big environment.
Mhm.
Yeah, and those are both very worthy adversaries. You know what I mean? I feel like those are two gladiators going at it.
Yeah.
It feels like there's a lot more power and strength in those deer.
There's definitely a dark one and a light.
Oh, sorry.
It's
Yeah,
nice,
the head
Adele.
of the white one was hard to angle.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought
Oh,
so
yeah.
too. The angle and the antlers crisscrossing, and it's just like ah. But I moved my eyes down, and it just changed his whole face.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
nice.
I kept elongating the snout of the
Yeah.
of the
Yeah,
I was
know.
doing that too.
guy, and then tilting his head a little bit more, and raising it, and
I kept doing that too.
I'll take a little responsibility for that because mine did the same thing. So
Oh, yours was great. Yours was great.
beautiful.
I
All right,
love how
great.
you dissect.
thanks.
Oh, nice. Look at that. She's got trees and background. Cool. Really nice. Really, really nice.
Mhm.
I like that the
Good.
branches of the trees actually had the same shape as the antlers.
No way.
Yeah,
I mean,
the branches, they sure do.
yeah, that's so good. That's so good. Yeah, and it makes logical sense. I love the tail. I haven't done it. I haven't gone into the background to have made those discoveries yet. So I'm glad that you did.
Yeah, really nice, you guys.
Yeah, really soft. All right, cool. Thanks, y'all. If you guys could send me pictures, I would love it. I love these.
Okay.
All
I'll
right.
send
I
them.
love seeing them.
Thanks,
And-
Trevor.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, y'all. See you next week.
Bye.
So-
Bye.
Bye.